worldwide, at least there are 500 private companies that operate largely unregulated, and they sell intrusive software to oppressive regimes that spy and harass their critics. I think how one sees oppressive regimes is obviously now a matter not decided based on whether they are electoral democracies or not. But there are at least 500 companies which have been doing so, and there is not much international regulation, which is export control compliance, that happens. Israel, obviously, NSO is based out of that, but it's not just the only Israeli company which sells it. And the government is responsible to issue those export control compliance licenses. Every government does that. United States does that. UK does that about technologies which have dual usages, which means that they can be used for civilian purposes, but for other purposes also. India is witnessing a massive cyber attack against civilians. And civilians whose lives have been attacked are not just the prominent rights advocates, politicians, or journalists, but it's also an attack and a cyber attack on individuals who incarnate democracy and the rule of law. I think three important points which emerge are that these cyber attacks are coming from our own executive government. I think despite the denials, it's not the first time. We saw this in 2019 as well, and we have basically just seen evasive tactics, whether it is pretending to pass the buck to WhatsApp or just saying that there is a vulnerability in WhatsApp, that's the problem, or just coming and making the evasive kind of statements which the Minister of IT has currently made or the ex-minister has made. So the attack is coming from our own cyber government. The tools are part of international trade weapons, and our government permit, encourage, and funds that. And most importantly, under Indian law, this is somewhat legal. I won't say completely because there are sections which we would be able to talk about. Considering the extent of this kind of surveillance, there is at least some recourse in law because this is malicious software without anybody's permission installed on devices which have now become the life and blood of everything. On one hand, this government is telling us that all our life services should be online. You can't get a COVID vaccine without an app. You
Absolutely.
cannot get rations if you don't have your Aadhaar number. You can't operate your bank accounts, your income tax filings, everything in the name of Digital India. They've tried to put online. Yet, India is also the country with the highest number of internet shutdowns in the world, which means that they can bring your life to its knees, economic, political, and social life, with just one kill switch. We know that mobile operating systems are not secure, and the combination of surveillance capitalism aided by the companies ensures that some kind of malicious surveillance, whether couched in legal terms or not, will happen. The second major point I want to say is we are perhaps the largest or the only democracy which does not have any judicial oversight or parliamentary oversight on surveillance that's carried out. Now, we have the PUCL judgment. We have some guidelines which form, whether it is the Telegraph Act or the Information Technology Act, which are also based on the same old guidelines. I would really like to know who are the people who actually spend all their lives on those rotary or perhaps the landlines for which those phones were made. So the anachronistic nature of that is pretty evident here. And everything which under the IT Act comes out are based on that exactly. 2014, Software Freedom Law Center India also filed a right to information application in which we were told only under the central government 7,500 to 9,000 phone calls are tapped every month. Now, this is only central government, not the state governments, mind you. Now, tell me if there are 9,000 phones, this is 2014, very old data. After that, they've decided not to give any information at all. But that also means that, and the oversight is provided by the executive itself. It's like I can check my own examination papers. What am I going to do? The second aspect I want to say is that there is not just this, but continuous steps being made to create a surveillance structure to which neither the judiciary nor the parliament, nobody else has an oversight. In March of 2020, we learned from the parliament, the government admitting that they had used artificial intelligence and facial recognition software to identify 1,100 protesters who were coming. World over, moratoriums are being now imposed. The governments themselves are deciding, companies are deciding, whether it is IBM or Microsoft, that facial recognition software is very, very, it's full, it's like mines of something. It's very dangerous, so we should not be doing it. India is marching full speed on without ever thinking about it. The third thing which I'm going to say also is that there are 3 surveillance projects started under the UPA, and that is why a political party who is in power doesn't matter, because the desire to control is universal. In 2013, when call data records of Mr. Jaitley were made available, and compared to what spying on a phone is, call detail records are like now seem like a small beer, I would say. And that time, of course, left the right to be left alone, and the way Mr. Jaitley wanted, we all want that version of privacy. They started Central Monitoring System, NETRA, and NatGrid. These are collectively and separately seeking to spy on the communication of citizens in India. Under these surveillance projects, the internet traffic of every citizen is subjected to interception and surveillance by the government. NatGrid has been built with an intent to enable the government agency to get information from banks, which is bank account details, transaction details, etc. And of course, then there is NatGrid. Now, that time when they started, that time we didn't have the Puttaswamy judgment. It didn't say that least intrusive methods have to be used, even when you say that there is perhaps a requirement by the state to surveil. And it doesn't actually allow for mass surveillance. So that's why the difference between wholesale or retail surveillance. Now, important point here is that whether in the parliament when questions are asked or the right to information, no information is available at all. We have filed a case in the Delhi High Court challenging these surveillance methods, as well as Pegasus when 2019 it came. The case is moving at the snail speed you can imagine it is. In 2019, when this happened, we wrote to the Standing Committee of IT, Mr. Tharoor heads it, again, saying, so this has happened. We would like you to speak to the civil society organizations, to the people who've been victimized. That time, 121 names came. Some things happened. They did speak to some of the victims, but where is that report? When MeitY has come up with breaking of encryption, which is the originality and traceability requirement, as it tries to control the OTT platforms plus online news organizations, we can see how the control of free speech, free flow of information, as well as surveillance, these are all parts or somehow interlinked parts of what is the system we are moving towards right now. And nobody should be taking this lightly, because it endangers the society as a whole, not just all the prominent individuals whose names have come out. And we should not underestimate the seriousness of the threat. And that's why different strategies need to be used at judiciary, at parliament, and even the legal strategy for different victims is going to look very different based on whether it will be a criminal investigation or certain will be involved or constitutional challenges will come in.